Very nice to see everyone, both online and offline. Юра, возьмите handout.
I see also Joy Edelman in touch.
We are pleased to welcome you at today's meeting of our seminar, which is very special because we have a special guest, Adriano Россi, Professor Emeritus of the L'Orientale di Napoli and a very distinguished scholar of Iranian studies who I think does not require an introduction for all of us. Everyone knows his contributions to Iranian linguistics and philology, and he has left a considerable impact in almost every field of Iranian studies, but of course, we can especially emphasize his groundbreaking work on Baluchi and the fundamental projects on the etymological and comparative dictionary of Baluchi, which has been a very long-term project and which, as far as I know, is now finally nearing its completion. And also his work on the Achaemenid inscriptions, on the corpus of Achaemenid inscriptions, and various other contributions, both philological, linguistic, and also in terms of organizing our field, because he has been the rector of L'Orientale di Napoli for many years, and also he is now the president of ISMEO, which supports many efforts directed at the development of Iranian studies, and especially valuable today is the international side of this organization. And we're especially, of course, grateful now in the circumstances that ISMEO and Adriano personally do not draw any distinction based on political situations, but maintain these academic relationships, which should persist in spite of all the events that are happening around us. Thank you very much. Of course, we hope that this collaboration will continue in the future. On a personal note, I would also like to add one detail. It's a coincidence that we're just now finishing work on the third volume of the translation and the digital version of Abaev's dictionary, and very often, especially when Baluchi data are cited, there is a note in parentheses AV Росси, личное сообщение, personal communication of Adriano Россi. So as you see, our department shares a very long history of cooperation with Professor Россi, and from the time of Vaso Abaev, who worked there, and furthermore during Vera Sergeyevna Rastargulova, who was the head of the department and who knew Professor Россi very well, we have always maintained this close and collaborative relationship, which now we are yet once more continuing. And now I'm giving the floor to Professor Россi, who will present a talk on the title, Do Iranian Stagnant Waters Ooze, Leak, or Exude? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure for me to be again here after the first agreement from the University of Naples and this institute signed more than 30 years ago, more or less, no, a bit more than 30 years ago. So I'm very glad to be again here, especially in this time, but in general, I would say. I've been recently many times in Moscow, but never having the time to come again in this institute, from which my history of the contacts with iranologists, Russian iranologists, started so many years ago. So I'm very glad to be here again. The research I will present today has been carried out within the frame of the ethno-linguistics of the Iranian area project, and based on lexical materials from the archives of the comparative etymological Balochi dictionary project, both projects under my directions since many years, and both being funded by the Italian Ministry of the University and Research at L'Orientale University in Naples and ISMEO Rome, of which institutions I continue to be part in different ways, as has been explained. I'm indebted to Garnik Asatrian for his permission to quote some of his dictionary notes here today, which derive from regular discussions we have been holding about our etymological dictionaries, Baloch is for me and passion for him, in progress since many years. In a recent study which discusses the four components of the cosmos, Chahar Zahagan, as adapted to the Middle Persian terminology in the translations from the Greek philosophical texts, Professor Jafari de Aghi, in his article Chahar Zahagan in the Middle Persian literature, published in the Italian periodical Vicino Oriente of 2014, mentions in passing some Persian verbal bases such as Zahidan, to fall, flow, drip, Zehidan, identical meanings, Juhidan or Zadan, to drip, taken from classical dictionaries such as Anandaraj and Nazemolate, which the Iranian scholar doesn't discuss in further details. The general impression that is drawn from these is that the same etymology envisaged for the Middle Persian philosophical term Zahad, meaning cosmic element, basically the one suggested by Newbery in 1931, that is from Proto-Iranian ooze, is also suggested by Jafari de Aghi for the Iranian semantic family of oozing or leaking or exuding. I intend to review this lexical family just to complement what he wrote 8 years ago in these rather rare Persian verbs. Wohlers and Steingas summarized the traditional lexicography with the entries Persian Zahidan, to flow, trickled, drop, fall, Zahid, shallow, holding but little water as a channels and similar, and so on. While in modern Persian of Iran, any verbs from this base seem to have disappeared, see for example, Khayem, Yunker Alavi, Rubinchik, Lazar, or are marked as archaic, see for example, Moin, Sohan, in early Persian, they are widely attested without any particular restriction of usage. For example, from Borhane Qate up to Steingas. In the Persian varieties of Khorasan, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan, at least one of the variants is recorded as in common usage. Khorasani Zahidan, Taravidan, Tarashkerdan, Tarashudan, Fararudi Zahidan, or also Zihidan, Ravagi, which means Birun Amadan, and Tajik Zahidan, translated by Saimidinov in Russian as просачиваться, выходить наружу, наполняться влагой in the literal sense, сочиться, to lose, or also Zahidan Darumadan, просочиться, насми, Johidan, to distill, to drop, to trickle as rain from the eaves, Johida, watered, for example, of garden, Jik, drops of rains, and so on. The fact that the Persian verb is matched by Kurdish jahin, which is translated in French by Nizam jaillir, jaillement, in Baluchi zdihag, which is translated by Jahandide in Persian taravidan, taravash kardaniab az zamin, chashme vacha, in Ziyak Zihidan, Taravoshodaneab, as Miane Righava Sangha in the Balochi Persian Dictionary, let's imagine the large areas of both Western and Eastern Iranian have known this verbal base, which at first glance doesn't seem to be documented in any modern East Iranian languages. The semantic of this verbal base appears strongly focused on the oozing of liquids, and consequently, it's not difficult to identify in connection with these verbal bases a large nominal family that, although well attested in place names of various Iranian regions, seems to have gone unnoticed in the literature, except for the brief observation of Wilhelm Eilers, on which I will return shortly. In the border area between Iranian Kurdistan, in a large region referred to as Zohab, which in a 1526 land transfer document published by Mokrin in 1963 on the basis of 4 different copies is referred to as Zohab in the Persian text and as Dahab in the Arabic text, en raison d'une étymologie populaire faisant dériver ces mots de la racine arabe Zahaba, aller, car c'était un lieu de passage de transhumance, tandis que le mot est tout à fait iranien et signifie les sources qui jaillissent, des Zé and Ab. Voir les personnes Zehedan, jaillir, ce mot Zehab est devenu parler de cette région Zohab. So this quotation from Mokri 63. As Wilhelm Eilers notes in the article on the Iranian Encyclopedia, the name of Persian Zahab, or even just Zeh, with local Persian variants, is widely documented, particularly in the east of Iran. In Kurdish in the west of Iran. In Kurdish dictionaries, the word doesn't occur frequently, perhaps precisely because it's preserved on an important part of the toponymic lexicon, often excluded from current dictionaries. It is attested, for example, in Kurdish, Zeh, which means river or water oozing from underground. Also Zik in Ibrahimpur, Mahabadi Je, water oozing from underground in Kalbasi. Kurdish Ziav, Zikab, Zehab in Kermashi, Zekzar, Mersh, quagmire in Dervishian, Zekzar, also Mersh and quagmire in Limuids and many other Kurdish dictionary we would not quote. In the forms with final ko, the forms with final ko seem particularly typical in the Kurdish Lori Bakhtiari area. See Lori Darejo Zarnik, which is spoken in northern Lori, Zekzar, which refers to permanently damp soil because of natural humidification. The same type of terrain is called Zoh or Zakzar, Mersh, quagmire in Bakhtiari, Zek in southern Lori, Zek-O in Lori Rumeshkani, Zek-O in Laki, Zek in Kalhori, Zak or Zak-Au in Go Rajui, Hilgorani dialects. In Kalhori, we also have Zikhau or Zikhau, dirty water, sewage or water, of course. Bakteri Zog, in the meaning of marsh, quagmire, also Zagzar, may testify the type Zak in western Iran, on which I will say more in a moment. Throughout this area, you can clearly see at work the suffix Zar, that we also find in Persian Alaf Zar, Shure Zar, Mark Zar, Namak Zar, Shen Zar, Khok Zar, Hoishk Zar, and so on. In the central Iranian dialect area, we have Kermani Zeh, water leakage from canals, Khuri Zahum, a section of Akariz, from which water leaks from the ground, Sivandi Hakzeh, which means wet soil, get through before digging the foundations, going up, downstairs. Zekyardan, water oozing from soils, from pits, and from other sources. Ashtiani Ze, water oozing from a jug or from the earth, Sadekia, and so on. In Fars, we have Shirazi Zek, which denotes the layer of clay under the top layer of the ground, so-called because it oozes water. Zehesh, oozing water in Berosi. Davani Zeh indicates hard layer of earth on which the foundations are dug, according to Salami. Perhaps so called because compared a contrario with the damp layers which it comes into contact with. Could also Afghan Persian zik, in the meaning of heart, fest in German, according to Monshizadeh 1990, have the same semantic development? I don't know. Persian Jiv reservoir, on this Ji I will say more subsequently, is already attested in the Shahnameh. In Steingas, we find Persian Zah, the meaning of a place where water boils up and comes forth. Zahab, the oozing of water through a tank or a bank of river, a place where water springs either from the ground or from a rock. Deep water, running fountain, or Zahab Nak, watery, verdant, shade of ground. Verdant because water, of course. Full of lime springs, Abze, water flowing from a fountain and over a corner of an eye, Zahak, low-level ground. Moreover, Zeh, water infiltration through a crevice, Zehab, water oozing from the edge of a river, or source, or tank, or lake, place from which the water boils, water whose depth is not visible, source flowing continuously. Abze, water oozing from the edge of a river, according to Moin, and Ze, suintement d'eau, according to Lazar, recent dictionary. Zehab, water seeping through a stream or drainage. Ze, kash, drain pipe, drainer in Aryampur. Zah or Zi, kash, Bewässerungsgraben or Bewässerungskanal, according to Juncker Alavi. The seepage, gradual penetration of water into the earth, gradual oozing of water from the inner layers to the surface of the earth, and zihab, drain, canal built to get excess water out of, according to Ja'fari. Going eastwards, we find Bandari, Fini dialect, Ze, oozing water from the ground, soil that has water on the surface. Girofti Kanuji, Zadan, leaking of water from the ground, according to Dehani. Bandare Khamiri Ze, lifting the surface of wells. Girofti Kanuji Zeho, Mersh, quagmire, according to Dehani. In the eastern varieties of Persian, we have in Khorasan Zih, fissure, crevasse, according to Farudi, and Ziu, canyon. In Mashhadi, we have Zeu, labeled as a very old word in Binesh. In the modern literary Tajik, we have Zah in the sense of humidity in Sameddinov, also wet as an adjective in Rahimi Uspianskaya, illustrated by the colloquial expression Dohi Zah, traces of moisture on the walls in Osimi. Shugni Zivor, branching out or secondary channel, according to Zarubin 1960, and Sarikoli Zivur, mouth of the river, according to Pahalina, should be connected also here with secondary var, but as always, Stebnikamist doesn't agree. And this is this comes from ooze war, according to this Proto-Iranian reconstruction with ooze war. In Balochi, we have Rakshani Balochi Zai in Ahmed Zai, waterlogging, also Zai Shan, waterlogged soil, Embrawi Zai, damp earth round a sprig in Elfenbein, Balochi Zau, Jahandide, in the meaning of Chashmeyeab, Zeheab. Also Balochi Zawen Kaur, perennial river. Kaur is river in Balochi. The same is in Sayed Ganj, in Zich, John Dide says is the same as thou, which means zehe ab, chashmeye ab. The same also in Sayyid Ganj. Balochi zai is a variant given in Jahandide, cross-reference to zeh and zau. It seems to be the same word as ze, as written by Elfenbein, or zai, also written by Elfenbein in 1983, seeping ground water. But we don't know from which Balochi dialect Elfenbein should have taken this word, because it doesn't specify. In Iranian Makran, we also have, besides zai, the variant zeh, Balochi Persian dictionary, and zia, in Ayubi, Iranian Makrani dialect, where they have this diphthongation zia. As to Rakshani Balochi Zok, hill spring in Apenzai, it seems connected to the types with final k, which I will mention subsequently. The East Iranian languages, in addition to the type Zak or Zag, we will talk about shortly, have Sarikoli Zei or Zai, Marsh, Quickmire, Pachalina, Yagnobi Zach or Zag, Marsh is a meaning, in Andreev, Lifshitz, Pisarchik, Zahamarka, Marsh, Quackmires, Zahamarga, Mirzozada, in Sarikoli Zeikash, Brook, Source, in Pachalina 1971. All could be considered as learned words from Persian, as the etymological vocabulary of Shugni does in the commentary of the entry Wahi Zak, swampy lawn, wet soil, quagmire, where the k form are explained as Zahak, marsh, giving small marsh, and then quagmire. However, when writing this comment, Stebling-Kaminsky was not aware of the Persian and Western Iranian forms of the type k or g, final k or final g. To the mention of the Eastern Iranian forms, one should add Wahi Ji, basin, pond, small water reservoir, which anyway Stebling-Kaminsky prefers on the basis of the etymological vocabulary for the Shukni group by Morgenstern and Edelman, to derive from old Iranian Zr types, to be compared with the Western Zraya, Old Persian Draya, in the meaning of lake, sea, and similar. As to the Wahi Jui reservoir, Pachalina 75, it's much easier to explain it in connection with Tajik Jui rivulet, Wahi Jui irrigation canal, Grünberg's develops and it's explained by Stebling-Kaminsky at paragraph 70 of his introduction to the etymological dictionary. While Wahi Ji, basin, pond, small water reservoir, would actually seem to be connected with Persian Ji, basin. As parallels of Persian Zak or Zag, we have in the East Iranian languages Shugni Zag, Sarikoli Zag, Yazgolami Zag, all meaning grass plot, lawn, or swampy lawn, according to Edelman, Batangi Roshani Zag, swampy lawn, according to Zarubi 1930, Yagnobi Zah or Zar, swamp, Wahi Zak, in the etymological by Stebling-Kaminsky, Munji Zak, swamp, quagmire, according to Grünberg, 1972, Ishkazme Zak, swamp, Pachalina, 1959. In all of them, the central meaning is clearly swamp. Again, the constant phonetic form and the presence in all southern Tajik dialects of Zag, the meaning of swamp, starting from Rosenthal, for example, might suggest that Persian forms could be could have covered the original local terminology. However, the forms in Ak of Wahi, Munji, and Ishkashmi leave open the possibility of a Pamirian internal evolution. It's indeed very improbable that a number of forms in K, final K, have been produced independently and as a result of secondary developments simultaneously in Lorizek, Kermanshahizek, Soranizik, all meaning water infiltrators or something like that, Kermanshahi Zalk, with this inserted L, Bakhtiari Zog, Quagmire, Balochi Zog, Hillspring, Tajik, Jik, drops of rain. So it would be reasonable to assume a Middle Iranian form derived through final K to final G. However, the only Middle Persian documentation related to our lexical family is contained in the Bundahish. You have the passages in your printout, where manuscripts, the two versions, one can possibly find three occurrences of the Zahabag, which Bailey transcribes Zahabak in the meaning of spring source. First occurrence, Aveshan have dopat Kanadagi Jamik, Amegerdend, Utpazrehi Haviderend, Wamakishvar Horend, Azon Zabahiha, Utpasar Harb do Pazrehi Fraskerd, Oham Rasend, U Abaza Buchan Rasend, Ku Azish Betazid Hand. The two rivers turn at the limits of the earth and pass by the seas and irrigate all the continent from that gushing water. Then both reach together the sea Frakerd and again come to the base fount from which they had flowed. The second occurrence is 88.6. Zahabag on road Azerbaijan Beayed Ud Patars Ozre Rezed. The gushing water of that river comes from Adurbadagan and pours in Pars and into the sea. The third occurrence is Abarig Amar Ab Udrodi Khanig Ukanas Kaha Sihast Ike Aveshan Zahabag Fraswari the stand. Other innumerable waters and rivers, fountain channels do exist from which gushing waters do irrigate. Moshe Zadeh, in his monograph of 1975, page 113, adds a further passage be attested in Pahlavi, which is in Bundaish 11c.4. You have in the handout. When Khwar Shidar comes back, the river will flow again as a horse inside. Munshi Zadeh's interpretation of this passage hypothesizes an arc formation from the base Za. And he writes in German, because the book is in German, Zahak fließend muss zu Neupersisch Zahidan Zav to flow gehören, Vergleich Zahab, Middle Persian Zahabak, the oozing of water through a tank or bank or river, running fountain, and Steingas, Zach, Kash, or Ze, Kash, Bewässerungsgraben, Bewässerungskanal, Abfluss, Junker Alavi. Somit bedeutet Asp Zahak fließend so stark wie die Größe von einem Pferd, which, by the way, is a very curious expression, even for Pahlavi speaking people. But Za, as a verbal base, is not attested anywhere in Pahlavi, while Bailey rightly draws attention in his commentary to this passage to Bartolome's quotation of the Videvdat of this passage, when the Pahlavi translation Bazak Zahag does correspond to later Western Basustava von der Stärke dick eines Arms. Similar expressions are used in Videvdat, the size of one finger, the size of two fingers, and for all the three, the same Pahlavi gloss, Drahnai, length, is added to Zaha, to explain the word Zaha, which may imply that at the time of glossing, this passage, the word Zaha was not so understandable to all the Pahlavi scholars as Drahnai was. Mackenzie consequently does enter this word as Zaha, depth, in his dictionary by prefixing an asterisk, which is used in his dictionary to indicate doubtful transcription. The vocalization, commonly accepted, oscillates between Mackenzie's Bahar's Zaha, where it's marked as a new orthography for Zahak, Pakzad's Zaha, Bailey's Ziha, in the meaning of measure, and Herzfeld's Ziha, in the meaning of measure. The existence in the semantic area of water oozing of a number of words ending in au, long or short au, and ok, o, such as Persian zau, cleft, mountain valley, fracture, Bakhtiari zov, quagmire, Mashhadi zo, irrigated valley, Rakshani Balochi zov, hill spring, Balochi zau, which means zeheyab, shmeyab, would lead us to imagine that various Western Iranian languages, and maybe even Eastern Iranian languages, have possessed, next to the form za and zai, also an alternating stem zau, which possibly, with possible derivatives in ark and orc. In many of the languages where this base is documented, H, Y, and Wow can all, and W can all act as phonetic glides alternatively, without any particular having the need to explain a particular process. There's also an exchange for phonetic reasons. Not all historical morphological details in the derivations can be easily explained, of course, but in my view, this is a relatively minor problem. This assumption would allow us to reconnect to this same family Pashto Zawa, meaning pass, matter, Ryun, Zaulan, Rumi, covered with past, covered with matters, Zaway Bahedal, Zaway Watal, transitive, meaning to ooze, as a matter from a wound, gravity. Zahab or Zuhab in Pashtun, in the meaning of pus, mucus, secretions. Zawa, Ziwa, pus, value. And Waziri Pashto Zahub, probably from Persian. Zoha, meaning cliff in a ravine over which water falls in wet water, according to Lorimer. With minor exception, here the semantic focus is on fluid or viscose matters. Balochi Zawag pass in Elfenbein and Balochi Persian dictionary could be a Balochi autonomous formation or a Balochi derivation in arc. Even Gurani Zohau, Sorani Kalmanshayev Romani Zuch, pass in Mokri and other dictionaries, or Lucky Zuho, Sanyas, blood and pus mixed together, could be originally formations in this same group. if they are not loanwords from some disappeared Persian forms of the type of Zog or Zur, recorded as Zog River, staying as Zug River in the Hoda, etc. As far as the vocalism is concerned, note the remark by Mokri in 1963, quoted in the start of my speech about backed pronunciation of Zahab as Zohab in the Kurdish area. Hassan Dust, who correctly separates the two entries, number 2839, Zahidan, in the meaning of Oftadan, Varavan Shodan, Vachakidan, and number 2840, Zihidan, in the meaning of Modern Persian Zayidan, doesn't make for the first any personal etymological proposals. He merely mentions Newbery, 1931, pages 116, who corrects Zahidan to ooze, connects Zahidan to ooze to Avestan ooze to throw out, as explained by Bartolome. In Eilers expresses some concerns by the issue in this form. Etymologisch lässt sich vielleicht bei Newbery Hilfsdrucksimpäcklevi Subvosche Gerstan anknüpfen. Doch bleibt das Verhältnis Jastan zu Zahidan nicht abzuklären. Newbery's proposal seems accepted by Garnick as Adrian to explain Persian Zah or Zich, oozing of water, as one may get from the draft of his entry, Zah, in his etymological dictionary in Persian in progress, which Garnick has kindly make available to me. Whereas in the connection proposed by Newbery, neither the verbal base nor the preverb ooze, implying upward, outward movements, thus convince the only base that would explain well both Western Iranian and East Iranian forms is that containing Khotanese zum, to pour, to strain, which Emmerich connects to Avestan Zaufra, trunk opfer, from the base Zau to pour libation, also present in Liv 179. This base has gone unnoticed in the Iranological literature, and the only scholar who has been interested in it on different occasions is Harold Walter Bailey. Commenting Khotanese zu, meaning puss, and its occurrences in the book of Zambasta, Bailey had connected these words with Pashto Zawa, puss, with the following annotation. Has connected this word with Pashto Zawa, which etymological vocabulary by Morgenstern dissociates from the Sanskrit base hav, with the following annotation by Morgenstern: not probable, as this root has an exclusive religious meaning in Indo-Iranian. Bailey had also noticed the presence of this same base in Ormuri zu, meaning puss, Yidga nar zu, with nar meaning super, extra puffs, which Morgenstern had already associated with Pashto Zawa and Khotanese zu. In the new edition of the etymological dictionary Pashto, the entry, which was marked as etymology unknown in the first edition by Morgenstern, no longer appears, even if Morgenstern himself, in the revised edition of the Indo-Iranian frontal languages, had connected in the supplementary notes printed at the end of the volume, had connected Parashi Z Pas Matter, page 427 of the Addenda, volume 2, and Pashai Zu Matter Pas in the Addenda to volume 3.3. to this group. Consequently, it seems rather improbable that Morgenstern cancelled this article, as Tremblay says, parce que un sang profond de ce verbe réservé au sacrifice sonavestique et védique paraissait exclu. In the dictionary by Bailey, the entries zu, pass, zun, to flow, to strain, were taken by Bailey as definitively connected to the Eastern Iranian words having the base for zau or zu, all meaning to flow, with an N present, even if without looking for any Western Iranian analogies that at the time were not known to him. As for Middle Iranian, apart from the Pahlavi forms already commented, one could connect to a lexical family, Parthian Wizawag, that appears only twice in the Manichaean corpus, one of which in M7136, being a small fragment with two words on the top margin, exceedingly fragmented, so ununderstandable. The other, anyway, difficult to interpret in M737R, Tar ud karbag che azawen wizawag, perhaps the darkness and dross exuded by them, as Mary Boyce understand in his edition of 1951. And Boyce again in the list of 77. The dictionary of Durkheim-Einstein has explained that so voce exuded or excrement with question mark. Adding a remark by Henning in this form. Henning's notebook had excessive superfluous. And then Durkheim-Einstein add another question mark. If, as I am convinced, the forms just reviewed are somewhat interconnected, the basic semantics must have been oozing of water through the bank of a river, or even oozing of water from the ground, pointing to slow horizontal or vertical movements, mostly bottom to top, but in some cases also from top to bottom. The slowness of water movements within narrow soils and or basins may have generated the meanings waterlogging, quagmire, and then by extension marsh, and hence similarities with the slow movements of any sticky liquid, including the organic ones, such as pus, matter, sinus, and so on. Various other meanings can be imagined as metaphorical projections of these primary semantics, as for example, these secondary channels that depart from a primary branch, both with reference to slowly gushing waters, even slow rivers, and to the traces left by them on the ground when there's no more water. For example, the meaning of cliff in the ravine over which water falls only in wet weather and the like. One last problem to explain is the coexistence in our lexical family of forms starting with z, being the vast majority, and forms starting with je. The latter include Persian side forms, and I continued only in Eastern Persian, johidan, to distill, to drop, to trickle as rain from the eaves, johida, water garden, Kurdish, jahin, to spring, to flow, and among nominals, Mahabadi Kurdish, je, oozing waters, perhaps Persian, jik, drops of rain, Persian, jai, pond, pool, water reservoir, and lake, and the probably Parthian source of the loanword into Armenian, zach, variants. Also zeh, anything disgusting in the dictionary by Acharyan, and modern Armenian jah, putredine, fracidezza. The translations are all Italian because Chak translate Armenian into Italian, as you know. Fracidezza, fetore, puzza, fracidume, marciume, sozzura, lordura, suscidume, moccio, and cispa. All Italian words are known to me. So, because the edition was written more than 2 centuries ago. But the general sense is clear with the final 2 glosses referring to bodily fluids. The random distribution of this form suggests local de-Africation phenomena, whose interpretation is made all the more difficult by the over-stratification of nominal and verbal Persian forms at different times. In any case, there's no need to hypothesize forms with an original je. The 3 variants of ze and je is a constant feature in the early documentation of Persian and in general in the transition between Middle Persian and New Persian. Modern literary Persian has inherited a mixed situation. According to Lazar, La prose présence monument 63, he says je ou je dialectal correspond à ze régulière en persan, crystallizing sometimes a variant, sometimes another, without being possible to reconstruct in detail the whole historical process. Thank you for attention.
Okay, dear colleagues, thank you very much for this very interesting and fascinating amount of information. Any questions either here or in Zoom? There is a question from Agnes has to leave. Yeah, goodbye, Agnes. Thank you very much for being with us. Actually, if there are, when people are thinking, I have my own very basic question. I'm wondering, first of all, could you please elaborate on why you believe these forms, after all, have one and the same etymology? Maybe we are dealing with at least 2 different stems. And second question related to this one is that maybe actually both Newberg's etymology, which derives it from ooze, and the relationship to this Cotonese root zun, maybe they're both correct, but they are related to different roots, like swamp and pass. Maybe they are different roots after all. So why do you think it's the same etymological
I don't know. Anyway,
group?
When Cotonese is involved, it's very personal. The opinion is sort of say anything on that. Your first question is about what exactly?
Why do you think it's the same root, and it could be 2 different roots, right? Two different etymological groups. Yeah.
But the semantics is so close in a very specific meaning. So very specifically, when this meaning it is so specifically close, it's impossible that the separation. So water drinking, go in a particular direction, a particular kind of soil, and so it's impossible that you.
This is true, but
arrive to this meaning by assimilation process, by compilation, by.
But pus, for example, is a bit different. This bodily fluids. It could be
bodily, yes, sure.
So you think this is a different group?
No, I'm convinced that all of the, you know, our school, perhaps you know our studies on the bodily parts, and so that they are continuously projections from the
nature,
from the nature to the body, from the especially from the nature to the. That's the one this is linguistic anthropological view, especially elaborated in Italy by Giorgio Cardona, by a particular school of ethnolinguistics. And it's very, the direction, for example, is very clear when you say in front of that, at the foot of that, and so on. It's very natural. You will find it's a linguistic university. You will find in all possible languages.
For spatial relations, yes, but the pass and swamp, that's an interesting comparison.
You have to consider also the gushing of bodily fluids as different reactions. You have to reason in that way. Because in going from one point of your body to another point of your body or the terrain.
And also maybe the relationship to this disgusting, like swamp, is also kind of a negative connotation. Maybe it's also related to this semantics. Yeah, and the swamp is also kind of not very pleasant. So maybe there is this connection as well.
So this is the basic problem. Eilers was the first, perhaps, among the Aeronautics to introduce the principles of similarity, semantic similarity with the different approaches to perceptions. How you think that your body function? So you have an idea how it functions, but it's not a correct one for the scientific. But you have to invent some metaphors anyway, because you have to explain to the surgeon, you have to explain to your parents, you have to explain. So you reconstruct some metaphorical process, copying from something already existing, or in another human being, or in an animal, or in the surroundings.
Thank you. Are there any questions in the Andrei Alexandrovich? Maybe.
I'm not an Iranian linguist at all, but I'm really fascinated by the amount of information from different languages that you presented. I have a couple of basic questions. What's the original Proto-Iranian shape of the root where you are talking about approximately?
It depends on what you think it should be.
So there is more than one possibility.
For example, Bartolome was convinced that it was zr, the original form. It is very clearly in his dictionary, Western dictionary. I'm convinced of that.
And what would be parallels in other branches of Indo-European for this root?
I don't know. I didn't have time to study it. Some analogies could be very, even in cells very close to the European area. Could be useful for the to see that they use metaphors or no. For example, that happened. The person who to spend the rest of India from the Indian side to the Central Asia, the authorities. It should be enlarged using the border languages.
Okay, thanks very much.
Any other questions? Yes, Artyom.
Thank you. So I have one small question. I concluded by myself that there are two semantic fields, maybe poles, meaning one meaning pure waters like river, lake, and most of them are Middle Persian, and there are other forms meaning dirty water like pools and swamp, and it is interesting that the forms meaning pure water that were in Middle Persian are almost all disappeared now and displaced by the other forms meaning pure water, like rud meaning river, and so on. Do you think that this thing that this forms in Persian meaning pure water and their distinction are connected things?
I don't know. Anyway, you took the real point in which there was some contradiction between the Middle Persian examples I gave to you, in which the sense seems to be river, normally seen, normally perceived a river. All of the other possible translation which I gave is a different perception of water. When you say lake, it's not intended as a pure surface of water, but is an enlargement of a pond in those languages. A pond could be of pure water or not so much. It depends on the mixing of rain and soil. So enlarging in many languages, the lake is perceived as a pond enlarging, and then so very few cases. have as a secondary meaning developed, in my opinion, developed secondarily late. So you should cancel these cases because it evolves from pond, and pond is perceived in this, to say, slowly gushing water. So as the rivers, when they reach the sea, and then they become marshes and everything, so they velocity, the speed of the rivers diminishes when they reach the river. So in that, so the real problem is, and from this there's a metaphor to past and similar things. So more or less this monkey is the same. In cases in which the meaning is reader in general, effectively, you are right to emphasize, and so perhaps you are not understanding exactly the two passages, two on the two, in which seems to be, because of the trick seems to be a reader. Could even be for something which we don't know about religious or mythical understanding of the authors, intended as particular kind of readers. We don't know. We must certainly check the passages in their wider context. So be done. So, thank you for the observation.
Thank you.
But so barring the mistakes, all of the rest is really disputed. But perhaps there's a particular evolution in the passion for some particular reason blocked there, remained there, not going with the other languages which developed in this meanings. Or there's a particular meaning in the passion in this that we don't understand. Anyway, we'll do the research. It's not very important to you.
But there is another meaning in a Western zaotra, libation. This is maybe one of the words that's also can be attributed to the group of clear waters. I think libation is not very close to the meaning pond.
But font you should again understand in the particular meaning. We, according to our tales, which are more or less are conceived in Northern Europe parts, more or less, or Northern Russian parts of the world, also. We understand the springs, the sources as pure water. It's completely the contrary when you go in Middle East. You see what the spring is. It's terrible, it's dangerous, because the water is muddy, is gray-black. So completely different perception of what a source is, what a spring is. As a spring, we have an idea of pure water springing and whitish. The reaction of a Middle Eastern people is to be careful about that. Which kind of purity has that?
Maybe that's the key. Thank you. Any other question?
I'm just curious which which etymology do you personally consider to be the more realistic one for this route? Which proposal do you prefer among these options?
I think it would be originally with the initial verb. So some, perhaps in Japanese paradox. Japanese preserving more, which is very strange things. One because the form goes to the original one. So zoo plus something.
So Newberg's proposal, you do not believe that it's true. Ooze
No,
this is not probable.
Against practically all of the proposals, something. So absolutely against that.
Yeah, and it makes sense because it seems improbable. In general, with the previous, yes, even in the real preverb, yeah.
Will explain too many things with this.
Because you just add the initial z. just to get the initials in the word. Yeah, and especially it's improbable that in all the branches of Iranian languages, this ooze got the same semantic development. It just means go out.
Yeah,
Why would you get swamp, pure water? Yeah, it's totally impossible.
This is
Uh-huh.
an impossible because, as you know, Avesta is only an unbelievable small portion of all the Iranian languages being spoken at that time. So we can't judge all of the phrases on that basis on the rest.
Of course.
So it's,
And in Eastern Iranian, it seems to be preserved only in, well, Khotanese, of course, and then Pashto. But in the Pamir languages, it's all loan words from Tajik, right? So.
yeah. Pashto and Khotanese are interesting. Putting summing up to the Western Iranian languages. It seems to be old, this initial.
Just, I wonder. No, but it's interesting that this is this correspondence. Any more questions? Maybe in Zoom? Are there any people who want? Yeah. Okay. So I guess then in this case we would like to thank Professor Rossi again for this fascinating set of data and insights.
Connected to the
Zoom. Yeah.
network. I see the name of Elena Molchano.
Yeah.
Pleasure to.
Yeah, and
greet
the Joyce from there is also Ederman.
Yes,
I think she's
Joy,
yeah.
I've already said, yes, she's connected. Greetings.
Yeah, I'm sure they also have enjoyed the talk, but just know there's a lot of data that needs to be processed, and so thank you very much for this again fascinating and insightful presentation. Let us thank the speaker again.